This episode, I want to riff on the Dao of Serendipity. What is serendipity? Well, first, I want to share a story to illustrate. And this is a true experience of mine that happened not long ago. In fact, it was on the holiday in the United States known as Thanksgiving. Well, 3 days before Thanksgiving, a longtime student of mine, he was out of touch for a while. And so I had some concern. So I was thinking about him, and then the next day he texted me, apologizing for being out of touch, but notifying me of some sad news, which was that his beloved uncle had passed away that morning. To empathize, I asked the student for a photo of his uncle as well as his name, so I could include him in my prayers, perhaps to smooth his transition. At least that was my intention. And so my student did text me the photo and the name, and so I proceeded for the next days to send some good intentions and some good energy and chi for the next journey of this uncle. Fast forward 3 days later, some friends and I had planned to join a sunrise gathering of indigenous peoples on Alcatraz. That's in the San Francisco Bay. And it took several logistics to get there. You know, the drive, parking, taking a ride share to go to the pier, to get in line, to get on the ferry, etc. And even arriving on the island, trying to orient ourselves, and it was still dark. The stars were still visible at night. And finally going up the hill and joining the ceremonial circle, the center of which was a bonfire. And speakers were already sharing their stories and their perspectives and intentions. So by the time we arrived, there were already several hundred people forming an inner circle and a second or even third layer. Eventually it grew to maybe 5 or 6 layers. So in total, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 people there. Now, as the sun began to brighten the sky to dawn, before the sun actually rose, I started to notice more details about the people around me. And one of the first that I noticed was a tall young gentleman standing directly to my left. And why? It's because he was wearing a vest emblazoned with 3 letters, USA, on his back. And it caught my attention because of the contrast and also the context. And there were also several patches sewn on the back of Native American symbols, like buffalo. Another thing really struck me was he was wearing a hat, and on the right side of the hat, it was painted with a dragon. And it was sort of an Asian style dragon, more serpentine. And it was in red. And on the front brim of the hat, when the gentleman sort of turned more towards me, I noticed letters that were written in white, and it was actually a name. Now, the day continued to unfold, and the sunrise that came up was glorious, and it was very powerful to be able to synergize with all the people there holding such sacred reverence and community. And the day eventually came to a close, and I returned home. I had taken some photos and some short video clips, which I sent to my student to share some of the energy of the day. And very soon after, he texted me back and said that, hey, that's my nephew. And I was struck and tried to identify who he meant. Is it this person? Is it this person? He said, no, it's that man who is wearing that vest and hat. What are the chances of that? And furthermore, it finally dawned on me, the sun pun intended, that the name on the hat was the name that my student had sent to me 3 days prior, whom I was actually sending blessings and goodwill towards. But perhaps because I was doing that in a more spiritual or non-intellectual, non-rational trance state, it wasn't until later where it registered, wow, same exact name on the hat as in the text. I even scrolled into the text 3 days ago or 3 days prior to confirm it was him. Now, to actually even plan to, go to this kind of logistical adventure and experience, say, okay, meet me here at this time, at this place, it's already hard for it to occur. But for there to be no conventional or concrete or intentional deliberate plan for this to occur, I think the chances of this happening statistically are near zero. So that's an example of serendipity. Now, a little bit on the word serendipity, right? It actually comes from a word Serendip, originally Arabic, and also I think there's even an older term from Sanskrit, Simhadladvipa. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, which means the dwelling or dwelling place of lions island, right? An island where the lions dwell. So that was a name for Ceylon, or what we call Sri Lanka. And there's a Persian fable about three brothers who traveled to Serendip, three princes actually, and they were on an adventure. And long story short, there was something about following the tracks of what they eventually determined to be a camel. Now, I want to share a quote of the first instance that serendipity was coined as a word, and it was by Horace or Horatio Walpole, who lived in the 1700s. And in a letter dated January 28, 1754, he mentions the word serendipity and describes his story, where the main characters, the protagonists, I quote, were always making discoveries by accidents and sagacity of things they were not in quest of. So that's kind of striking. So the accidents part we can understand. It's sort of coincidental, not planned, right? Not intentional, not deliberate. And that was sort of also true for this Thanksgiving Alcatraz story. I wasn't planning to meet my student's nephew. Now, the second part of the quote, sagacity. So that is the characteristic of sages. And so sages are known for their wisdom as a form of refined intelligence. And so there is an acknowledgement of a certain state of mind that we must be in, or these princes must have been able to open up to or invoke in order for these seeming incidences to coincide. And not to say that I am fully realized, but for about 25 years or so now, I have cultivated what I term self-care cultivation, or what I also like to call practical alchemy, right? Inner alchemy. And what are the ingredients of this process? It's simple. It's your mind and your heart and your body. That is your mental, emotional, and physical state. Elsewhere, I've elaborated on that, but here I can say that there is a tuning of these three. Imagine 3 strings on some sort of stringed instrument, let's say a guitar or a guqing, which I play. And if they are not individually in the right state of tension, let's say, they're not optimized, then when you play them together, we would say they're out of key. That is, to our ear, they will sound discordant or not in harmony. However, if you tune these 3 strings properly, that is, tune your mind, tune your emotions, and tune your physicality, then wow, you have a beautiful chord. Now, this chord then transmits outwards and, let's say, can resonate with our surroundings, sort of like in an orchestra, which is multiple instruments even, right, to extend the analogy, in synergy. And we could say then that the instruments, not only the strings are tuned, but the instruments are attuned to each other, right? They're in sync. And here I can refer to the term synchronicity, which is coined by the famous Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. And synchronicity, as a word kind of connotes, has to do with certain things occurring at the same time, right? So there's some overlap to serendipity. I like to use the word serendipity, synergy, and synchronicity in specific ways, but we'll continue with this examination of serendipity. Now, the question is, when you practice, and that could include meditation or contemplation or qigong, which is currently the modern trending term is breath work, which is almost one literal possible translation of qigong, or interoception, which in the Chinese would be something like 内视, right? Internal seeing, turning your perception inwards. So there's different modalities, right? And I practice and present sort of my interpretations and versions of that. And there are some events and courses if you're interested. And here's a hypothesis, one, that when you cultivate more, you will notice more serendipities unfold in your life. Now, hypothesis one, is that because you have become more powerful and there's something streaming through you, your intention is more focused and deliberate, such that you are creating more serendipities? Some would call that manifestations. So that's one possibility. So that's sort of more, you could say, quantitative, right? So there are more occurring, right? Over here, over there, right? That you are sort of tapped into the causality of. Now, the second hypothesis is more qualitative, that there are innumerable serendipities occurring all the time, but we don't notice them until we increase our perceptiveness, our keenness of awareness by removing blockages, if you will, or tuning, as I said, of our mental, emotional, and physical state. Now, it's up to you to decide and test out, but I will offer the meme that serendipities are a inspiring confirmation of your progress in the process of, you can call it self-actualization, individuation, or cultivation, or realization, or enlightenment, that are encouraging, that has the benefit of developing faith and trust that there is some kind of intelligence, some kind of order, some kind of affinity, which is beyond your individual dimension or scale. There's something greater that you can attune and align with. And that's relaxing, right? We don't have to do it all ourselves. So I encourage you to take note, if you are on some process of practice, to see if you notice more of these serendipities unfold in your life. And perhaps you want to write it down. You may notice, right, as you invest your time, energy, and finances and other resources towards your self-cultivation, that these alchemical sort of crystallizations of serendipity will occur more often, maybe from once a year, right, to once a month, to once a week, to your daily serendipity. So hopefully you found that informative and inspiring. And if you want to send me some messages or comments, I'd be happy to hear from you. So thank you, and be well until next time.